Hello, everybody. Welcome to the presentation about making a meaningful Seder. We're just going to give 1 minute, a few seconds for people to join with us, and then we're going to get started right away. Making a meaningful Seder. Thank you, everyone, for joining us as we discuss how to make our Seder meaningful. Before I begin, just want to, again, mention, as we did last time, to all of us who are dealing with this difficult time, if anyone has people they're close to who are sick, who are not feeling well, who are dealing with this crisis, we wish everyone refuah shlema. We wish everyone strength dealing with the economic issues as well. And hopefully all of us together can emerge from this difficult crisis. And thank you to World Mizrachi for giving us this opportunity to learn Torah together, and in this particular situation, to prepare for Pesach together. As I mentioned last time when we did the first part of this series, the goal here is especially important in the times that we're dealing with, when many people will not be with extended family and many guests at their Seder, and it'll be limited maybe even to just 2 people alone. Even one person by themselves. Our goal here is to make it as meaningful as possible, and not just an experience where we go through the motions and whatever happens, happens. No, this is Seder night. This is the most important night of the year. And during this important night of the year, we must come together and grow. We want to leave Seder night better people, better families than we were before Seder night. And I was even thinking to myself, even someone who is alone can also internalize these ideas and commit themselves to be better people after the Seder is over. Last time, we didn't get very far. We got up to the very beginning of Magid, as we're using the Seder as a platform to be able to have meaningful discussions or meaningful thoughts to ourselves. And we got right up to the beginning of Magid. The last thing we talked about was Emunah, about the entire experience of Yetzias Mitzrayim being a platform to talk about faith in God, and how that's the goal of our entire lives, is to take whatever level of belief we have and turn it into a yidiyah, something which we know. We continue, still on that same paragraph, Avadim Hayinu. And Avadim Hayinu, according to the Gemara Psachim, according to Rav, is an example of the principle of matchil bignut umesayem bishvach. You start with the negative, and then you get to the positive. And our Seder is supposed to be structured that way. According to Rav, it's avadim hayinu, we were slaves, and then God took us out of Egypt. According to the other opinion, it's we used to be ovdei avodah zarah, we used to be idolaters, and now we're monotheistic and we're close to God. But why? Why does this have to be the format for the Seder, to start with the negative and then go to the positive? In order to answer that question, we're going to shift gears a little bit to the very first mitzvah that the Jews were given as a nation. I used to love asking my students, what do you think the first mitzvah the Jews should be given as a nation should be? They're given this mitzvah in Egypt before they go out. They're finally an Am, they're a nation. What is the first mitzvah they're going to be given? And students will answer, Shabbat, it should be tzedakah, it should be kashrut, things that we see as so primary, important in Judaism. And what is the answer? The mitzvah of Rosh Hodesh. HaChodesh hazeh lachem, Shmot Perek Bet. The mitzvah of Rosh Hodesh is the first mitzvah that we're given as a nation, and it's given to us right before the commands that we have about Pesach. And the question is why? Why is that the example that's chosen? The Gemara in Sukkah on Daf Chaf Tet teaches us that the Jewish people are compared to the moon. The Jewish people are compared to the moon. Why? How are we in any way similar to the moon? So some of the commentaries explain that just like the moon, every single month it's dark. We don't see the light shining off the moon, but we know 100% that it is going to become bright again. It's not even a question in our minds. That is the destiny of the Jewish people. We go through our dark times, and a little bit later we'll talk about why we have to experience those. But we know we have a brit with Hashem, we have a covenant. We know that we're going to emerge on the other side and shine bright. And there's a beautiful, beautiful example to really capture this, really captures Jewish history. Abraham Avinu is the first Jew. From Abraham Avinu, when Judaism essentially begins, until the climax, the highest point in our history, when Shlomo HaMelech built the Beit HaMikdash, we have Israel, we have Yerushalayim, we have the temple, the Beit HaMikdash. The countries of the world respect us, they revere us, they come to our temple to bring sacrifices. From Abraham to Shlomo doing that was 15 generations. Just imagine the 15 days of the moon, starting from the very beginning of the new moon when it's dark until it reaches its full moon. 15 generations. And from that moment of Shlomo HaMelech until the lowest moment in our history, with the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash and our being sent into exile, that was another 15 generations. Just like the moon goes from the full moon to becoming completely dark over the course of 15 days. That is the story of the Jewish people. And we need to know as a nation, when we first start out on our path, just getting the very basic mitzvot as we're leaving Egypt, that is going to be our destiny as a nation. We're going to have low moments and we're going to have high moments. We're going to fail as a people, and then we're going to fix ourselves and we're going to move forward. And that really has been the story of our people. We've gone through so much suffering and so much difficulty, and yet look at where we are today and look at how we have emerged. This is such an important lesson to talk about with whoever we're sharing our Seder with, or after the Seder to share with our families and our friends, this idea of the first mitzvah. And that is why Matchil Bignut U'Masayim B'Shvach. Seder night is for us to remember that idea, that we as a nation will go through difficult times and we will emerge and shine bright. And the greatest quote, and if you don't have the quote in front of you, you should go on Google and just type in Mark Twain about the Jews and print it out and read this at your Seder table. It is so inspirational and so important for whoever we're sharing our Seder with to hear this. Here is what Mark Twain writes in Harper's Weekly magazine in 1899. If the statistics are right, the Jews constitute but 1% of the human race. It's just a nebulous dim puff of stardust lost in a blaze of the Milky Way. Beautiful words. Properly, the Jew ought hardly be heard of, but he is heard of, has always been heard of. The Jew could be vain of himself and be excused for it. Now get ready for this. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, and then faded to dream stuff and passed away. I would add, and they persecuted the Jewish people. And they're gone, and we're here. The Greek and the Roman followed and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Again, they persecuted us. We experienced the darkest of times with them. They're gone, and we're here. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but have burnt out, and they all sit in twilight now, or have vanished. Spanish Empire, Spanish Inquisition, the German Empire. And look at where we are today. And Mark Twain says, the Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his alert and aggressive mind. And then Mark Twain says, all things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? We're going to experience those dark times, but we know for a fact we're going to come out and emerge even stronger. Matchil Bignut U'Masayim B'Shvach. We have an example of that in our generation, in our century. The Holocaust, the worst possible catastrophe imaginable. Just a few years later, the state of Israel, and everything that we're experiencing and all the glory that we're experiencing in Israel today with all those struggles. And even when we're experiencing the struggles in Israel, whether it's war, whether it's terrorism, we know that we are the moon. Matchil b'gnut u'mesayem b'shvach. And we have to know that as a nation. And it should give us pride as a nation. But Matchil b'gnut u'mesayem b'shvach is not just on a national level. It's also on an individual level. And this perhaps could be an even more important message, especially with our children, with our friends who are sharing the Seder with, or who we can share this idea with after the Seder, after we internalize this concept. Shlomo HaMelech says in Mishlei, Perek Chav Daled, Sheva pa'amim yupal tzadik v'kam. We're going to fall. We're going to fail. We're going to sin. We're going to do things that are wrong. And the question is, how do we deal with that? Do we fall away and not move on? Or do we pick ourselves up? The tzaddik picks himself up. When Cain sinned at the beginning of the Torah, and he's all sad and distraught over what has happened, Hashem says to him, Perek Daled, Pasuk Vav in Bereshit, get up. Lama naflu panecha. Why is your face fallen? Halom tetiv se'ed. Make yourself better. Make yourself better, and then you can move on. We fail as humans. The Tanakh is filled with stories of our greatest leaders who had moments of failure. We have to take those moments of failure, aliyah l'tzarech, yerida l'tzarech aliyah, build ourselves to be even stronger and be even better people once we see how we fall. And that is also a critical lesson. You had a bad day, wake up tomorrow with Moda Ani, it's a fresh new day. Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu. Elokainu shemashin natata bi tahorahi. New day, a fresh day. You had a bad month, Rosh Hodesh. We bring a korban of chatat, we bring a sin offering. It's time to refresh ourselves, put aside the past month and move on. And certainly it's that way with Rosh Hashanah every single year. Matchil b'gnut u'mesayem b'shvach. On a national level, and on an individual level. Such a critical lesson to share as we just start the Seder with Avadim Hayinu, talk about that principle and how critical it is for us as a nation and for us as individuals in our relationship with Hashem, both ourselves individually and Am Yisrael to Hashem. One lesson that we can take from the Seder in this part 2 of our Haggadah preparation. We continue in Avadim Hayinu and we make the following statement. Ilu lo hotzi HaKadosh Baruch Hu, if Hashem did not take us out of Egypt when He did, Harei anu uvanenu uvnei vanenu, we would still be mishubadim leparo b'Mitzrayim. We'd still be enslaved to Paro in Egypt. That's not possible. We all know that. We can't just say that line and not think about it. It's not possible in the course of world history that things would not have changed and we would no longer be slaves to Paro in Egypt. The Egyptian empire does not exist anymore the way it did back then. So what does this line mean? It's quite obvious that it doesn't mean physical slaves to Paro in Egypt, but it means that we would be spiritual slaves to Paro in Egypt. Had we not been taken out of Egypt, had God not redeemed us when He did, we would be spiritually enslaved to Paro, because sins and the idolatry, whatever Am Yisrael was doing there, that has a long-standing impact. A minute ago, we were talking about how when we sin, we have to pick ourselves up, and that's true, but we also should not make light of Averot and what happens to us when we sin. And that is a critical part of this message of, had God not taken us out right then, the impact spiritually of the impurity of Egypt would have stayed with us forever, because sin leads to spiritual contamination. That is why, right, by the way, when we sin, we create distance between ourselves and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's why part of the process of forgiveness is the korban, is becoming close to Hashem and creating that close relationship once again, because we don't want to remain distant, and we want to have that spiritual contamination. That's why before Olam Haba, before a neshama, after passing away, can achieve that closeness to Hashem in the world to come, it has to go through cleansing as well. The concept of Gehinnom in Judaism is not eternal damnation, but it's a finite period of time during which the neshama has to confront the shame over all the things that it's done wrong, and that cleanses this neshama to be able to connect to Hashem. We have to realize that when we do Averot, that spiritual contamination takes place. In fact, the Ramchal, Rav Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, in Mesilat Yesharim, when he explains Tshuva, and he asks, how does Tshuva work? Right? There is Niyat Harachamim, there is a God who functions with compassion, but there's also midat hadin, which cannot be ignored. There's God as a God of justice. So how can we just say, Slach lanu avinu ki chatanu, go through the motions and be forgiven? Where is midat hadin? And the Ramchal explains that real tshuva, full tshuva, I should say, comes when a person feels so bad over what they've done wrong that pain itself serves as the cleansing. You don't need the shame of Gehenom anymore because you yourself feel so bad over what you've done. You don't have to go through any suffering any longer. That is tshuva, because we must cleanse ourselves from that which we've done wrong. And the Rambam says that full tshuva is when God himself can testify that you are not going to do this sin again. We have to talk about this. We have to talk about how when we do things wrong, it's not just an X on one side of the equation, on one thing, averot on that side of the scale. We're hurting ourselves. And when we hurt ourselves, we have to go through a process to fix it. If we would not have been redeemed from Egypt, it would have stuck with us forever, because that is the impact of Tum'ah, and that is the impact of Averot. We have to think about the impact of Tum'ah on our neshamot on a daily basis. We live in a world where we're exposed to so much Tum'ah. We have to talk with the people at our Seder about this issue and to make sure that we protect ourselves from that. We're blessed with 4 children, and at every single birth, when I looked at this newborn child, I remember thinking to myself, this neshama is totally pure. Tahorahi has not had any tum'ah whatsoever. And Hashem, please help us protect this child from the tum'ah in the world in which we live. We have to recognize and talk about, it's not just you've done something wrong, it's we've taken a pure neshama and we've hurt it. And that is something which we can learn from this line in Avadim Hayinu. But just like we see how Bnei Israel were able to redeem themselves and reach the level of Matan Torah and the open revelation of Hashem, we can do so as well. And we have to leave that line, not just feeling sad over the negative impact of Averot and the impurity that hurts our neshama, but also be dedicated, be devoted to making sure that we make ourselves better and that we recognize that we have the opportunity to cleanse ourselves. And let's do that here in this world and reach the point where Hashem himself can testify that we will not do the Avera again because we feel shame over what we've done. And that enables us to feel this connection to Hashem, this close connection, not just in this world, but also in Olam Haba. We move on to the next story in the Haggadah, which is a platform for a fantastic, fantastic discussion with our families, with our children, with anyone who we're sharing the Seder with, or like I said, prepare ourselves for this conversation after the Seder is over. We have Ma'aseh. We have this story of the rabbis who are sitting together in Bnei Brak, and the 5 rabbis are staying up all night, and they're telling the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. These are the greatest rabbis of the time. What are they doing staying up all night talking about Yetziat Mitzrayim? They don't know the story? What are they doing all night? I'll never forget one of the most meaningful Pesach nights I ever had. We were blessed in our family to host someone who was his first Pesach Seder ever. And after the Seder was over, he said to me, "Can you teach me the story?" He didn't know the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And we sat for a few hours from the beginning of Shemot and learned through the story. That was very powerful. He's actually learning the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim for the first time, but we know the story. These rabbis certainly know the story. What are they doing talking about it all night? The answer is they are looking for deeper explanations, for deeper understandings. They want to know more about the story. Because every single year, we can have new insights and new understandings, because that's the way Torah is. The highest level is to be a Talmid Chacham. He's still a Talmid. He's still a student who's working on new understandings. And sure enough, the very next paragraph, we see Ben Zoma learns, says, 70 years I've been working on this issue. And I didn't know the answer to this question, but I've been working on it. It's been bothering me. And I've been trying to understand the answer. Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky used to say that Torah learning can be compared to a child who gets his first pair of tzitzit when he's 3 years old. Nice little cute pair of tzitzit. Everyone takes pictures with him. Beautiful, very cute. If that child wore those same tzitzit going into first grade, it'd be a little bit strange. If he's wearing those tzitzit in 5th or 6th grade, he'd be the mockery of his class. And of course, if he's working that as an adult, it's absurd. Rav Yaakov said that's the way our Torah learning has to be. We can grow every single year as we're learning the parsha with new insights, with new understandings. And that's what we have to learn from these rabbis. They were up all night long, getting new insights, asking new questions, trying to understand what's happening in the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. And that has to be the model for all of us as well. There are two stories that come to mind when I think about this concept. One is the story that a Rav was looking for a shidduch, was looking for a kala, for a bride, for his, sorry, the other way around, was looking for a boy to marry his daughter. And he came to the Beit Midrash and he banged on the bima and he said, anybody who can answer this question, that shows that you're the Talmid Chacham who's worthy of marrying my daughter. And he asked a very difficult question and all the students were working on it and none of them could find the answer. And the rabbi said, okay, and he's going to move on to the next yeshiva. He's looking for the best Talmid Chacham for his daughter. And as his carriage is pulling away, one student in the yeshiva goes running after him. And he stops the carriage. And the rabbi says, someone has the answer to my question. And the student said, no, I don't have the answer. He said, so why do you stop my carriage? He said, because I want to know the answer. You asked this unbelievable question and you left us hanging without an answer. What's the answer? The rabbi said, you know what? That's who I want for my daughter. Because it's not about who's the smartest, but this young man is a Mavakesh Hashem. He wants the answers so badly. He's not going to give up until he has the answer, and he is worthy of marrying my daughter. The other story happened in the yeshiva of Nevarduk, where there was a visiting rabbi who was talking with the Rosh Yeshiva, and he said, who's the best student in your yeshiva? And the Rosh Yeshiva said, you see that boy over there? He has the best memory of anyone in this yeshiva. He said, you see that boy over there? He's the quickest mind. He thinks so quickly. See that boy over there? He has the deepest mind in the yeshiva. And the visiting Rav said, okay, but who's the best out of those three? Who's the best in the yeshiva? And he pointed to another young man in the yeshiva. He's the best one in the yeshiva. He said, I don't understand. This one had the best memory. This one had the deepest mind. This one had the quickest mind. How is this young man the best one in the yeshiva? He said, because he's not the smartest. He doesn't have the best memory. He's not the quickest. He's not the deepest thinker in the yeshiva. But he's a Mavakesh Hashem. He never stops until he gets an answer. He learns and learns and learns and wants to get new understandings and deeper and asks more questions. That young man ended up being the Stipler Gaon, Rabbi Yaakov Yisrael Kanievsky, Bnei Brak, when the Gedolei Hador in past generations in Israel, he was a Mavakesh. He wasn't the smartest, according to this Rosh Yeshiva, didn't have the best memory in the yeshiva, but he was a Mavakesh Hashem. This is such a critical lesson because children sit in classrooms, yeshiva students, seminary students sit in classrooms and they see people around them who are really smart, who are really quick, who are really deep, who have incredible memories, and maybe our children don't. And that can really hurt their motivation. I can tell you in the years that I learned in yeshiva and at Kollel, the top guys were the Mavakshe Hashem. They were the ones who were matmidim, who learned whenever they could, grabbed every opportunity, wouldn't give up. And that is what we can learn from this story of this Maaseh. And we have to talk about what's most important. God gives us whatever talents we have. He gives us whatever skills we have. And what's most important is our motivation and our desire to grow in Torah and to gain new understandings in Torah. And that's what we can share when we talk about this story at the Seder. We move on to Baruch HaMakom Baruch Hu. We give 4 blessings to God. We thank God 4 times. And right after that, we have the 4 sons. There's no way we cannot equate these two together. 4 thank yous to God and 4 sons. And we're thanking God for all of these children. Chacham, the Tam, She'enu Dei Lishol, and the Rasha. We thanking God for the Rasha? What is going on over here? Well, how do we understand this? The whole concept of Rasha is difficult to understand. What is going on over here and why this thanks? The answer is yes. We are people who label others as Rasha. However, there are numerous lessons in the Torah which teach us that that's really not our place to be doing. We have the Ktoret, the incredibly incense, the incense, the incredible smelling incense that was offered in the Beit HaMikdash and in the Mishkan. And we had to have every single spice there, or it was invalid. You couldn't offer it. And one of those spices is the chelbonah, a horrible, horrible smelling spice. But when that spice is together with the ketoret, with the rest of the spices, it helps give off the most beautiful, beautiful smell. It's almost like that note in the orchestra, which sounds off by itself, but when it's together with all the rest of the harmony, it just adds that other level, which makes it even more beautiful than it was before. It's invalid without that bad smelling. We think it's the bad smelling sense, but really, it adds the greatest smell, the greatest fragrance to the ketoret. We have this idea on Sukkot. We have the 4 species that we bring together, the etrog, the lulav, the hadassah, and the arava. And we're taught that these represent different types of Jews, those who have Torah and mitzvot, those who have Torah and don't have mitzvot, those who have mitzvot and no Torah, and the arava, no Torah, no mitzvot. Yet you don't fulfill the mitzvah if the arava is not there. Because even that person who you see as not having Torah and not having mitzvot, who knows what they have and who knows what their value is? That's not for you to judge. They contribute something to Am Yisrael. And before Yom Kippur begins, we come together and we say in Kol Nidre, Anu matirin leitpalel im ha'avayanim. We allow even those who we think are sinners, and everyone is saying those same words, we're allowing them all to come and join together with us. Because we cannot be Am Echad. We cannot come to Hashem as a complete nation if everyone is not there. We cannot be the judge. Yes, we thank Hashem for the child who we think is the Rasha, because we have absolutely no idea who that child is or what that child does. And the worst thing that we can do is actually to say he's the Rasha and he's the outcast. No, he's part of the Seder. He's asking the questions at the Seder. We're told what to answer him, and we thank God for him as well. Whenever I think about this idea of we don't know the value, and you can share this story at your Seder table, that the famous story of Yosela, the miser, comes to mind. This wealthy person who everyone would come to him and ask him for help with all of their needs. And he would always say, no, no, no. And he would send people away. Yosela, the miser, passes away, and they couldn't even get a minyan together for his burial. No one wanted to associate together with him. And then after Yosela passed away, the rabbi of the community all of a sudden started getting all of these requests from people in the community. I need food for my Shabbat table. I need money to help with my child's medical needs. Over and over again, people were coming and asking. He couldn't understand why. And he looked into it and he found out that every single Friday morning, those people who had no food, they would find an envelope under their door for Shabbat when Yosela was alive. The people who had medical needs, they'd wake up one morning and there'd be money in an envelope for them. Yosela, the miser, did not want to take credit for all that he was doing, so he would shoo people away. But then after hearing their needs, he would make sure that their needs were taken care of. And people flocked when people realized this to his grave. And together as a group, they asked for forgiveness from Yosela the Tzaddik. Yosela the Tzaddik. This is the way we have to be. There cannot be any judging at all. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. How do you love somebody else like yourself? It's impossible. We love ourselves more than we love other people. What does that mean? V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. How can we possibly say that we'll love somebody else like we love ourselves? And the commentaries explain, what does it mean to love them like yourselves? Not the amount that you love yourself, but all of us, when we look at ourselves in the mirror, we know that we have flaws, but we manage to push those flaws aside and we say, despite our flaws, we're really good people, and we are. That's the way we have to look at other people, not focusing on what we see as their flaws, but looking at, just like we look at ourselves, look at what's good about them instead of focusing on what's bad about them. This is the concept of thanking Hashem for the Rasha, and we must talk about this because children, adults, we are judgmental. We spend so much time focusing on the negative traits in others and judging others and concluding that this person is Rasha. We hear this story about that person, this story about another person in communities, in families. It rips people apart. Stop judging people. We thank Hashem for who we think is the Rasha. We have no idea who is a Rasha and who's a Tzaddik. Appreciate the value that every single person brings to the table, to the family, to the community. And if we do that, Am Yisrael will be on a whole other level. You talk about unity necessary to bring Mashiach. Imagine where we would be if all of us were able to function on this level. In the Four Sons, there's another very important topic that we can talk about and as a platform for very important discussion, and that is the She'eino Yodea Lishol, the child who doesn't know how to ask. We usually understand that to mean a baby, a younger child who doesn't even know enough to ask a question, but it also can mean someone who hasn't been educated and doesn't know enough to be able to ask any questions whatsoever. Let's talk about both of those for a moment. First of all, for the little child, you know what it says in the Torah? It's really one of these psukim that we don't focus on enough. But when it talks about Yetziat Mitzrayim, it says Laman Tesaper, Shmot Perek Yud, Tesaper Ba'oznei Bincha, Uben Mincha. We say to relate the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim to the ears of our children and our grandchildren. Why does it say to their ears? Why to their ear? What other part of their body are you going to speak to? Torah has no extra words. Why does it say to their ears? My Rosh Shiva, Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg Zatzal, said very beautifully, this is referring to a little child. Firstborn, when they're firstborn, they have no ability to comprehend what you're saying to them. Tell the story of Yetziat Mitzrayim. Talk about Emunah. Talk about spirituality to little children, because on a neshama level, it does have an impact. In fact, we're taught, the Rambam says in Hilchot Talmud Torah, that when a child begins to speak, first you teach them Torah, Tziva, Lanu, Moshe. And then you teach them Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. They don't know what they're saying. Why should it matter what their first words are? Oh, it does matter. It does matter what their first words are, because that impacts them on a neshama level. She'eino Yodea Lishol, at Petachlo, open up, start talking about it at the earliest of ages, and it makes a difference on a neshama level, and we should be committed to doing so with our children, with our grandchildren, with our great-grandchildren, to make sure that even if they're at the youngest ages and they cannot comprehend, we're still pumping them with spirituality. That's lesson number one that comes from the She'eino Yodea Lishol, and worthwhile to have a discussion about that idea, that even on a neshama level, it makes an impact just hearing words of Torah and hearing about Emunah, hearing about spirituality. The other level, though, of the She'eino Yodea Lishol is an adult who doesn't know anything. Sadly, we live in a world where so many of our brothers and sisters know nothing, to no fault of their own, and we tend to be hesitant to open up to them. We don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. We don't want anybody to feel like we're imposing on them, and we don't open up about Judaism and about our faith and about our incredible, incredible rich tradition. But there's a pasuk in the Torah. It says in Vayikra Perek Yutet, Lo tamod al dam re'echa. Don't stand by while your brother's blood is being spilled, when someone's blood is being spilled. That's not just physical while somebody's dying. Spiritual death is also something we just cannot stand by and watch as it happens. Kol Yisrael arevim zeh lazeh. The fact that we are responsible for one another is not just a slogan. I'm responsible for that person's spiritual well-being. Let me try to find a way to inspire that person. At petach lo, open up to that person. It's interesting, it uses the feminine, which usually means a softer approach. Don't try to be coercive. Don't try to force them to do anything, but try to inspire them and at least open up the conversation with them. At petach lo. You never know what is going to get someone started on their path. Rabbi Wein tells the story of a Rav that he met who was driving in his car didn't know it, but he was driving in his car on Yom Kippur night. He was totally removed from Judaism. He was on his way to a concert, and there's a non-Jewish policeman who's holding up traffic, and the light keeps turning green, and he's not letting anybody go through. And he honks his horn, and the policeman comes over and says, "Why are you honking the horn?" He said, I have tickets to this concert. I'm going to be late. Why are you holding up traffic? And this non-Jewish policeman says to him, "Sorry, tonight is Yom Kippur. It's a holy night for the Jewish people. We're holding up traffic so that these people can cross the street and go to their temple. You got to wait tonight. It's their time to cross the street. And all of a sudden it hit him. The non-Jewish policeman knows that it's Yom Kippur, and he doesn't know that it's Yom Kippur. And he started studying, and one thing led to another, and he became a rabbi of a community. One little moment of inspiration that God sent this messenger. We could be those messengers as well. I had a student whose path towards becoming religious, and now he's living a fully religious life in Jerusalem, spending most of his time studying Torah. He came to Israel in order to volunteer on a kibbutz, not religious in his background. And he was on a bus going to Jerusalem, and his suitcase was below it, and the compartment under the bus, the luggage compartment, opened up mid-route on Highway 1 to Jerusalem, and his suitcase fell out. He got to Jerusalem, he got to the central bus station, and his suitcase wasn't there. And he couldn't imagine what could have happened over here. How did this happen? Where's my suitcase? And he went to the police station a few times in the central bus station, and somebody heard him talking in English and is broken, trying to communicate with these Israeli policemen. And somebody says, "What? The green suitcase?" And he brings it out. Someone was driving in Highway 1, saw the suitcase on the highway, managed to pick it up and gave it to the lost and found. And for this young man, he said, "Oh my gosh, I cannot imagine a place in the world where someone would do this. These are the most special people in the world." And the policeman said, "There's a mitzvah called Hashavat Avidah. You have to return a lost object." He goes to learn and ends up being fully religious. But even if someone does not end up being fully religious, just reconnecting people with their Judaism. We live in a time where this is so necessary, where people do not know about their traditions, and we must at petachlo. We must open up to them. We must have the courage to follow what the Haggadah says and do so. And whoever you're sitting at your Seder with, commit together to be people who are going to be opening up to others. After the Seder is over, after Pesach, communicate with those who couldn't be at our Seders with us, and talk about how we as a family must take on as a project when we can host people, when we can get together with other people, to make sure that we are opening up and teaching about our glorious tradition with other people who do not know. They're the She'im Dei Lish'ol. They haven't been blessed with the information to be able to be connected to their Judaism. On Seder night, let's commit to be those people who will reach out to other people. That takes us to the paragraph of Vihisha Amda. Vihisha Amda, it's a beautiful song. Different people have different customs in terms of how they go about singing it, holding the coast. It's a very, very important part of the Seder, clearly. But we must talk about what it says. B'chol dor vador, in every single generation, they come against us and they persecute us. And we know that we're going to survive. We know we are going to survive. HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Matzilenu miyadam. We are going to be saved from whatever persecution comes our way. But there's a question which anybody, any child, but even an adult must be wondering as we read this paragraph, which is why? Why do we have to go through that suffering? Why is it necessary for us to experience this? We don't understand. We live in a world where there is so much suffering, and especially for us as a nation, if we are God's chosen people, why are we going through that suffering? And we have to understand, and we have to talk about this openly. We can't hide the question and not approach it, because all of the children are asking it. There's a broader question about suffering and tragedy, which we should open up to as well as we talk about this topic. Now, we're never going to fully understand or have an answer to this question. Moshe Rabbeinu himself, according to the Gemara in Brachot, asked God this question. He asked God, "Tell me your ways. I want to understand." The Gemara says he asks, why do tzaddikim suffer? Why do rishayim flourish? What is going on over here? What are your ways? And God tells him, you're not going to know. So we're never going to fully understand why there is suffering and why there is tragedy in this world. The Torah makes that clear. The Gemara in Brachot makes that clear. And that's also important for us to explain. The Gemara says that God showed Moshe Rabbeinu his back, and the Gemara says it means the back of his tefillin, the knot of his tefillin. Putting aside what it means when we say that God has a knot of his tefillin, very, very confusing what that means. God is not physical. God does not wear tefillin. But I heard a beautiful explanation to this. Look at tefillin, the knot of the tefillin from the back. It's a jumble of knots. It makes no sense whatsoever. It looks like it's fulfilling no purpose. You go to the front and you see that it's holding up the tefillin shel Rosh. In this lifetime, we don't have an answer to the question of suffering, but we do know that at the end of time, we will have an answer to why there is suffering. And we have that faith that goes back to the emunah, which we talked about in the last session that we have. However, despite the fact that we don't understand why there is suffering, it doesn't really make sense to us, there are some explanations that are given, and it's important to talk about them at our Seder, talk about them with our families, with our children, with our grandchildren, with our neighbors, with our friends, to have this open discussion. One explanation is that it is punishment, that God does get involved in our lives, midah keneged midah, not to punish, but instructive. God is sending us messages through the things that we experience, and each one of us individually, when we are experiencing any kind of suffering, we should ask ourselves, why? Why are we going through this? What can I learn from this? How can I improve? There might be that message of the midah keneged midah. There's definitely the cleansing, the Yisurim Shel Ahava, where God is just giving us cleansing to help atone for the things that we've done wrong, to give us the opportunity to really experience great joy and connection to God in Olam Haba. But then there's another level, and that is the level of transformation. The Midrash tells us in Yalkut Shimoni and Yirmiyahu that olives, when they're crushed, we're like olives. Am Yisrael is like olives. Why? Because olives, when they're crushed, they give the greatest byproduct, olive oil. But it's only through the crushing that it can reach that point. So we as a nation, when we talk about our national suffering, we go through that. Again, why each individual person suffers the way they do when we as a nation are suffering, we don't understand. And each individual can look at it as midah keneged midah. Each individual can look at it as Yisurim Shel Ahava, but we don't understand why it's happening. And B'ezrat Hashem, the time will come when we will understand why that happens. But as we're going through it as a people, we can reach the greatest of heights. As an olive is crushed, it gives off the greatest possible byproduct, that olive oil. And that's as the chosen people who have a responsibility to bring God to the world, we experience that suffering. That is on a national level. It makes us stronger. Look at where we are today after all that we've gone through. Our numbers are less than we would want them to be. Far too many people in our eyes have died, have been killed through all the suffering that we've been through. Far too many have been lost because of the assimilation that's been forced upon us. But we're still strong, and we're in Israel, and we're being a light unto the nations. Amazing things that are happening. We not just survive, but we thrive as we come out of that persecution. We don't want those challenges as a nation, but we can emerge stronger as a people afterwards. That's part of it. But as individuals as well, it's important to have the conversation about how when people suffer, and again, no one can tell anyone else how to deal with their suffering, but we have to remember how great people can be, the high levels that people can reach through their suffering. I mean, suffering is certainly talked about in Tanakh, certainly in Sefer Iyov, certainly in the Gemara. We see great people who are suffering, and we're supposed to learn how they dealt with their suffering and how to grow through it. But I want to share with you two people who we don't necessarily see as the tzaddikim in the Jewish people, first of all, and they're known for other traits that they had. But I want you to be able to share with your families how they dealt with the suffering that came their way. Extremely, extremely powerful. The first example is Christopher Reeve. Christopher Reeve, Superman, the actor who played Superman. Strong, athletic. He represented the strength of the human body and the physical world. Sadly, Christopher Reeve went through terrible, terrible suffering. He had a horrible accident and he was paralyzed. And he wrote a book, very powerful book called Still Me. Play on words. Still me is I can't move, but still me, I'm still myself because I'm not Superman. That's a role that I played so that I could have a profession which I enjoyed as an actor. That's not who I am as Christopher. And he writes in that book that prior to his accident, he was frequently asked, what is a hero? He was the ultimate hero. So people would always ask him, what's a hero to you? And he said, a hero is someone who, he would always say, someone who's courageous, who does things without thinking about the consequences. And he gave examples, Harry Houdini and Charles Lindbergh, and he talked about various athletes who pushed things to the limit. That's who he was as Superman in the movies, and that's who a hero was. But now he says, after his accident and all the suffering he's gone through, he says the following. Now my definition is completely different. I think a hero is an ordinary individual who finds the strength to persevere and endure in spite of overwhelming obstacles. These are real heroes, and so are the families and the friends who have stood by them. A terrible tragedy, and we have no idea why he had to experience what he experienced. But look at the change in perspective and his view on the world which came through it, how he grew as a person, still me, through that experience. When we talk about suffering and tragedy, we have to talk about the growth that can come through suffering and tragedy, that we as individuals have the capacity to be squeezed and grow from it. We as a nation have the ability to be squeezed and to be crushed and to still grow from it. Another example, Dennis Byrd. Dennis Byrd was a defensive lineman for the New York Jets. What a life he had. Professional football player, making huge amounts of money, playing every Sunday in front of 80, 90,000 people, millions more watching on TV. He had it all. And Dennis Byrd, one Sunday, dove to tackle the quarterback. The quarterback ducked away from the tackle, and Dennis Byrd smashed straight into another member of his team. And he fell to the turf, and immediately he realized he cannot feel anything. He is paralyzed. And he wrote an incredible book inspiring about the path that he went through to try to progress and move a little bit and get somewhere. And Dennis Byrd writes the following. People want to know if I ever ask, why me? Really legitimate question. Someone who had it all and now is reduced to being paralyzed. And Dennis Byrd writes, when I look back and remind myself of where I've been, of where I was only a matter of months ago, of where I was years ago, of all the blessings I've received throughout my life, with so much life still ahead of me, how can I ask why me? If I've learned anything from my experience, is that the Lord is with us if we falter. He is with us if we fail. The Lord is with us when we break, and the Lord can help make us whole. I've also learned, he said, that all of life is a blessing. That realization has been the real miracle for me. He's a different person because of all the suffering that he's gone through. We as individuals have to talk about that. Why is there suffering in the world? We have no idea. At the end of times, we'll understand. But once we're experiencing it, we can take it and let it plummet us to depths that we cannot recover from, or while dealing with the pain and dealing with the suffering and dealing with the mourning and confronting the tragedy, we also recognize that these are opportunities to try to grow and be different people. Christopher Reeves, Dennis Byrd, all of us have the capacity to do so. And that is part of this message of Vihisha Amda as well, that we should have the ability to grow as a nation, to grow as individuals. Kadosh Baruch Hu matzilenu miyadam. We've suffered along the way, and we come out even stronger. I hope that you've appreciated some of these lessons that we've talked about that you can use as springboards for conversation for your Seder. I certainly hope that we can get to another one as well, and a part 3, and get through some more critical lessons that we can learn from the Seder. But most importantly, to prepare, to have our notes ready and open up these conversations. Amazing things can happen when you open the floor to conversation about all these topics. And I want to mention one last point before we close. When you ask a question at your table, what do you think you can gain from suffering? What do you think about judging the Russia? All the different topics that we've talked about tonight. Matchil b'gnut mesayem b'shvach. There's going to be silence when you ask a question, because it takes a while for people to have the courage to ask a question. I was taught in graduate school and speech class that it takes the average person 8 to 9 seconds to actually raise their hand in front of any audience to ask a question. So ask the question and give everyone some time before you move on, assuming there are no questions. Because if you wait those 8-9 seconds, you'll be amazed by how many questions might come. Last session, we talked about the importance of questions, manish tana, that we want questions. So give that time, give that quiet, and hopefully after those 8 or 9 seconds, those at our Seder will ask questions and the discussion will build from there. And all these topics we talked about now can be platforms for our Haggadah discussion and for a meaningful Seder. Hope to see all of you again in our next session. Wishing everyone a courage to deal with these very difficult times, both on the health side, on the economic side, on the social side. And with God's help, we'll all get through this together, and everyone should have a meaningful and a happy Pesach. Want to remind everyone that coming up after me in a few minutes is Yonatan Razel. You don't want to miss this. Some inspiration, music, Divrei Torah. So let's get together again in a few minutes and be there in the World Mizrachi World Beit Midrash with Yonatan Razel coming up in just 10 minutes. The person who's, it's so distracting for me, Dina.